So the ink is still drying on an historic agreement between the UK Office for Investment and Abu Dhabi's Majesty investment company to significantly expand what is known as the UAE UK Sovereign Investment Partnership, with the UAE set to invest $13.8 billion, that's £10 billion in UK money, over the next 5 years. And that's going to focus on sectors such as energy transition, technology and infrastructure. And it will also build on an existing partnership around life sciences. Well, to unpack all of that, I'm delighted to be joined at AB Talks today by Simon Penney, who is Her Majesty's Trade Commissioner for the Middle East and Her Majesty's Consul General for Dubai. Simon, welcome to AB Talks.
Thank you very much indeed for having me.
Very welcome. So we'll dive right in. Boris Johnson talked about the rich history between the UK and the UAE when signing this deal, but he said this was all about the future. How significant, in your view, is this agreement, particularly as both nations kind of emerge from the shadow of the pandemic and seriously get back to business and international trade?
Well, look, it's a really good question. As I say, the UK is a very long-term friend of the UAE, and you only have to go around all of the Emirates to see the involvement the UK has had over the years, just in some of the early infrastructure to a lot of the amazing buildings and beyond that you see today. So we build off a relationship of deep friendship. But as you say, it's all about looking forward. And as the UAE looks to the next 50 years, not surprisingly, it's also looking about its strategy and how its economy will evolve as the reliance on hydrocarbons moves across to other industries. And it won't surprise you that a lot of the sectors of the future are ones where the UK excels at. But I say that not through arrogance. They're ones where we excel at today, but we need partners to develop them, not just through the provision of money, but also through the provision of relationships, capabilities and skills. And that's why I think the foundation from which we're taking our relationship forward into the next 50 is a really, really sound one in the sectors that you mentioned.
I was going to ask, because $13.8 billion is a significant vote of confidence in that relationship between the UK and the UAE. But kind of how much, this seems like it's like a dual thing. How much of this is based on old-fashioned bilateral relations and a great friendship? And how much of this is simply a seriously smart investment in the future that will pay off for both nations? Is this good business?
I would say it's a bit of both and everything in the middle. Clearly the relationship is an important one because it's one that's been built on trust and longevity. But the UAE, like everyone else, is a very smart investor and they will be looking for financial returns. So it's not just about being seen to be doing the UK a favour. On the contrary, Mubadala and broader UAE are looking at sectors where there is a real capability that the UK is developing that they can work in partnership with, not only to support growth in the UK, but arguably and even more importantly, to further encourage UK businesses to establish a presence here in the UAE in those sectors that matter, that are going to drive this economy and world economies forward in the decades to come.
So dive into it a little bit more for me. You talk about those specialities, you talk about that talent. What are the priorities within the Sovereign Investment Partnership? What are you going to collaborate? What's top of your agenda? What things do you want to make the most impact in with this?
It may sound a gross oversimplification, but the starting point of the conversation is what matters to both sides. We sat down with the UAE and we asked them the simple question, what matters to you and what are you looking at? And we then mapped that ask to what we in the UK are also looking at and where we see we have competencies. And we honed in on 4 areas, which you touched on briefly at the beginning. The first is life sciences, and we actually announced that earlier this year, where we were identifying £1 billion of the 10 to allocate specifically to life sciences. On the back of that 1 billion announcement, what you saw last week was the addition of a further £9 billion in 3 additional sectors. And those will be technology in its broadest definition. They'll be in clean energy, so the transition to carbon neutrality, not just in the UK, not just in the UAE, but globally. Clearly that presents a huge amount of opportunities for businesses on a global scale.
Yeah.
And yeah, sorry.
Oh, I also was, because I was reading Khaldoon Al-Mubarak, who's the CEO and managing director of Mubadala, saying that life science project was already ahead of where they thought it would be, was already making good progress. For the uneducated like me out there, just tell us a little bit broader on life sciences. I mean, what is that? What does that encompass?
I mean, effectively, it is all of the research and development that is going on into technology within the healthcare sector. So, I mean, in its broadest definition, it's everything that is healthcare related into the development, the research of new capabilities and new processes in the provision globally of healthcare. So it really has come to the fore, particularly with COVID, on a global scale. So it really is probably the most popular sector at the moment, not only for investors, but also for R&D and university spin-outs.
So are you hoping there's going to be an incredible amount of kind of white label technology that's created through this partnership that kind of enrich both countries, but also then play a wider part in the world beyond?
I mean, that clearly is one such opportunity that can come out of it. But what we see in the UK is you see a lot of spin-offs coming out of universities. So the research that goes on in UK universities, a lot of that research is starting to feed its way out into the commercial sector. And what we're looking at trying to do with Mubadala and other investors for that matter, it's not just exclusive to Mubadala, but for the purposes of this relationship, is investing either directly in those companies that are spinning off out of universities or through dedicated funds. And I think that's a really key aspect of the life science part of the investment partnership, is that we're also looking to attract dedicated life sciences funds, of which Mubadala is going to be instrumental in establishing in the UK.
To me, that seems like good bit. That seems like you're almost creating an academy, or investing in an academy to create unicorns and to identify unicorns before they're actually out in the market.
I mean, that's absolutely right, and I think the fund industry in the UK is very broad, but in certain sectors we have gaps. And I think in terms of life sciences, what we hope to be able to achieve through this relationship and others is that we actually avoid UK spin-offs and startups becoming someone else's unicorns. We want them to be our unicorns. We want them to be the UK unicorns that the UAE can share a significant part of.
Now, we know that the UAE can be agile and likes to move fast, but a deal like this isn't done overnight. What's gone into getting to this point?
Well, you're quite right. It's not something that was sort of dreamt up overnight. It's been the best part of 18 months in the making. But to your point on agility, I mean, the concept was really cemented when our Prime Minister met with His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed in December in Downing Street. And they both agreed that they wanted to establish this partnership at pace. And I think you referenced His Excellency Khaldoon Mubarak, and the team. We're all delighted, somewhat surprised that we've managed to achieve it in such a short period of time. And in fact, the Sovereign Investment Partnership, as you mentioned, is now been sized to £10 billion. We've already deployed about £1.1 billion of that across 12 transactions. And we have a further visibility, which we hope to conclude this year, of another £1 billion. So we will already be nearly 20% deployed within 9 months. So I think it's testament to the desire of both parties to see this succeed in areas that matter to both of us.
How has coronavirus played a part in that? Because obviously for some industries and some enterprises, that's been a setback. But then for others, it's been an accelerant, and it's shown the real value of investing, particularly in the technological space. Has that been a factor in this?
I think in part. I mean, I think you can see, and I think a recent report from Deloitte confirmed that the UK is the #1 destination for foreign direct investment, but more particularly, one of the areas that has inspired confidence is the way with which the UK has dealt with the pandemic. So, whilst every country was afflicted broadly at the same time, it's the way you deal with it and the way you come out of it, which I think has further inspired inward investment confidence into the UK. But it's much more than just COVID. I mean, there are a lot of fundamentals as to what makes the UK an attractive destination. As I say, where we as a government are focusing heavily on are sectors that are going to drive the economy for decades to come. And that aligns very, very neatly with what the UAE, and I should say all Gulf countries and beyond, are looking to try and do with their economies. So there are natural synergies in us working much, much more closely together.
I mean, talking about some of the kind of the financial imperatives underneath this, we've got Jerry Grimstone was talking, the UK Minister of Investment. He was saying that this partnership would increase prosperity for both nations. How do you see that playing out? Where will this generate prosperity for the UAE as well as the UK?
Well, I think in terms of the UK, I mean, firstly, the most obvious one is it is a further source of funding into the UK. So, it's a vote of confidence in our economy. Secondly, and this is quite a key point for the investment partnership, historically, we've tended to see investment focused more on the southeast of England. Where the partnership is particularly focused on is the whole of the United Kingdom. So it's ensuring we get inward investment into areas of the UK that wouldn't ordinarily have seen foreign investment funds. So into the north of England, the Midlands, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales. It really is a whole of UK focused effort. So it aligns very much with the UK's levelling up and building back agenda. And thirdly, it's about the creation of jobs. This creates jobs. It creates jobs for UK people. And that's what it's all about. It's about creating jobs, building the economy and building back better.
Well, as a boy from Nottingham, I'm glad he had the Midlands included in that list.
I'm also from the Midlands as well at some point in my, so I'm a big supporter.
We saw last year, I saw the figures last year about the trade between the UAE and UK was sat around $12 billion. How do you see that deal driving this forward? And outside of this deal, what's your thoughts of, your forecast for trade in the coming years?
Yeah, well, I tend to sort of look at the year before 2019, because 2020 clearly was an abnormal year by anybody's measures. So the year before, which is, I guess, the last full year before COVID, bilateral trade stood at £18.6 billion. So you're quite right. We saw quite a reduction in the COVID hit years, but we are very optimistic that we will return back on trend in the next year or two as we see the global economy pull out of the impact of COVID. But more particularly, we are very, very focused on that number growing above trend. And you would have seen the UAE has very clearly articulated its 10 by 10 ambition, which is to grow trade by 10% every year for the next 10 years. And it's no coincidence that they've specifically identified the UK as being a country within which they want to achieve that ambition. So we have very, very shared ambitions about growing exports in both directions. So it's not just about the UK selling more to the UAE. It's not just about the UAE buying more from the UK. It's about helping the UK to export more and helping the UAE to export more. And sorry.
Okay, please finish.
No, I was going to say one of the sort of the mechanisms that is often highlighted to facilitate trade, of course, are free trade agreements or FTAs. And we do have a strong ambition and desire as the UK, now that we've left Brexit, to strike FTAs around the world. And you'd have seen some of those already starting, the most advanced of which is our Australian one outside of the EU. But our Secretary of State, Liz Truss, has gone on record saying that the GCC is a really important market for us. And we do have an ambition at some point in the near future to commence discussions.
What's exciting you the most as you look ahead to this deal unfolding? You personally, Simon?
Which deal, the SIP or the
SIP?
Yeah, I mean, it's like all things. It's very easy to be high on ambition and high on statement. The devil's always in the detail and the execution. I think I'm delighted that we will, by the end of the year, have undertaken more than £2 billion worth of investment, which, as I said, is nearly 20% of the stated size of the fund. So I think for me, it's all going to be about execution. It's going to be about achieving the objectives, which is in getting investment into all four corners of the UK from a UK perspective, but also from a UAE perspective. We really want this to work in both directions. So I'd love to see more UK companies coming to the Emirates, setting up in the Emirates, using the Emirates as a regional hub and helping to diversify and grow the economy here.
You talked about that free trade agreement with this region. Should we strike that deal, and how long you think we're away from that? What do you think the impact of that will be on that trade relationship between the UK and this region?
Well, I think firstly, I mean, doing business in the UAE and more broadly across the Gulf is not that difficult by comparison, you know, and that's evidenced in the volume of trade we already do absent a free trade agreement. So, for example, in terms of UK exports, the Gulf in aggregate is the UK's third largest export market globally outside of the European Union. So outside of the EU, number one for us is the US, it's then China, and it's then the Gulf. So this is already a very big export market. So, and that's been done without a free trade agreement because tariffs are not that high, the maximum being 5%, and you don't see many non-tariff barriers. So I don't think we should see an FTA as a panacea like you might in some other countries. But given the sheer volume of business that we already do and the aspiration to do more, clearly a free trade agreement will act as a further catalyst because in aggregate, even though it's only 5% tariffs, if you multiply that across all of the exports, it still adds up to a very big number. So we will be reducing a fairly significant barrier to trade in both directions.
I'm going to switch gears and just put our focus firmly on the UAE for now. The UK, like many other nations, you're here in the UAE preparing for Expo. What do you think its legacy will be? And who do you hope to reach through your pavilion? What do you hope the legacy of the UK's involvement in Expo will be?
Well, I have to say we are really excited about Expo. I mean, it's been a long journey to get to this stage. I think it must be nearly almost 8 years now since the bid, and obviously we've had an extension by a year as well. So it's great to be almost finally less than 10 days away now from the opening. The UK Pavilion is ready to open, I'm delighted to say. But I think our pavilion and our focus is not so much on maybe what people might see as a sort of traditional heritage view of the UK. It's all about looking forward and innovating for a shared future, as we call it. So our program is aligned obviously with the key themes of Expo, but within our own program, we have what we call 8 breakthrough moments. And those are ones where we challenge ourselves and the public with key questions like, you know, how will we eat in the future? How will we travel? And then under each of those themes, we're going to be showcasing the best of UK innovation around the future of mobility, the future of autonomous vehicles. You know, when you come to look at transport, when you come to look at food, it will focus on things like agri-tech, you know, food security. With a world population growing to 9 billion, you know, the stress on food is going to be acute. So we're going to be focusing under that breakthrough moment on the best of UK knowledge and intelligence and technology around solving challenges that the world faces, not just the UK, not the UAE, but the world is facing. We want UK to be at the centre of that debate.
Give us a sneak preview then. What's your favourite thing in that pavilion right now?
Well, I have to say it's an amazing looking building if you haven't yet had the opportunity to see it, because we're inviting the public to participate by providing one word when they arrive, and that one word is fed through artificial intelligence to create a living poem which will be beamed across the whole front of our pavilion. So everyone is going to have an immersive experience. But I think for me personally, when you go inside our building, you're in the most incredible, what we're calling a soundscape. And just the light and the sounds in there are so incredibly immersive. I'd encourage all of your readers to come along and experience our pavilion. And the tagline I'm sort of personally adopting is that the whole UK experience will be Davos by day and Glastonbury by night, because we will be focusing on UK heritage, of which we have a very proud and rich history which we really want to put on the world stage.
I mean, you say Davos by day, and it's one of these things, isn't it? Expo is much more than an exhibition, isn't it? I mean, it is a powerhouse of trade, of negotiations, discussions. What's going to be keeping you busy at the, within your pavilion, and what do you hope the legacy from that side of things will be?
Yeah, well, we have in excess of 500 events over the 182 days in our pavilion. And I said that we want to be part of a conversation. What's going to be going on inside our pavilion is a conversation. We will be showcasing the best of the UK today, but we're bringing thought leaders, we're bringing creators, innovators together to have that conversation, both physically in the pavilion and also in this hybrid world, increasingly, remotely through the various VTC means. So it's going to be a global conversation, 500 events on top of all the other things that will be there for the families.
Simon, thank you so much for joining us on OB Talks. Great to hear your insight on the Strategic Investment Partnership, Expo and travel. Thanks very much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed for having me.